Hello everybody, my name is JRomero and my partner is RLewis, and we'll be presenting noun identification, a software design technique. Quick outline of what I'll be presenting today is first I'm going to go over a quick noun definition, and then I'll briefly discuss and cover noun identification and how we could use that in studying requirement documents. Then I'll briefly review the pitfalls of noun identification. Then I'll complete this presentation with the upside and downside of noun identification. And finally, I'll discuss a few recommendations. So first off, what is a noun? If we all recall, a noun is a person, place, or thing, right? According to the dictionary.com, nouns are often described as referring to person, places, things, states, and qualities. So noun identification, in a brief definition, is the practice of identifying classes or methods by noun identification in an SRS document. So in studying requirement documents, I'll try to apply it with our automated coding extreme document that we just finished up. So the first thing is a simple rule for obtaining the classes. Start from the requirements document. So the first thing you need to have in order to do noun identification is actually have a SRS document, or at least one that's in progress. Next step, in function-oriented design, you would concentrate on the verbs, which corresponds to the actions to do this. So if we recall on object-oriented programming, and in our case it's more of object-oriented design, this is the things that the functions can do. Once we identify the verbs, the next step in studying the requirements documents is in object-oriented design, you underline the nouns which describe the objects. You don't necessarily have to underline the nouns, but it's easier to distinguish it once you have your nouns and verbs identified within the document. So in this case, what I did in 3.1.4, we have text panel, and the text panel says the application shall contain a main text page, which is our noun, that will do display and do accept user keyboard input. Some pitfalls to be aware of: identify general user interface controls that initiate a use case. Note, don't bother with the visual details here. This will evolve later. What this means is try to identify anything that the user would be interacting with. Next, identify forms or windows for entering data into the system. So any physical user properties or visuals that will prompt the user visually on the display. Next, identify messages used by the system to respond to the user. So any prompts, any context menus, stuff like that. So the upside of noun identification is it can be done from a general problem description, or better, from a use case or scenario. So it's easy to apply noun identification because it's very English based, and you can adapt. Obviously, we've all been able over the years in English identify nouns and verbs, and we can interpret those as being methods and functions. Also, you can completely understand the application domain. Once you've gone through the SRS document and identified all your methods and classes using this technique, then you'll have a stronger or better understanding of the application domain. You'll be able to identify objects within the SRS. Also identify associations between those objects. And finally, you identify general attributes and responsibilities of the objects. what are those objects and what can they do? What should they be able to do according to the requirement statements that we state within the document? Some final upsides: modeling interactions between objects. So we'll be able to model or diagram the relationships. Modeling how individual objects change state, help identify operations. So how we may consider here is transitions between the different model or objects as they change within the interface. Finally, checking the model against requirements, making adjustments, iterating through the process more than once. So even though it's easy to identify verbs and nouns in our document, it's another best practice here that once you identify all those models and objects and classes and forms and such, is to just verify that we are interpreting the words within the document appropriately. Some downside is it is human language. So human language used to express system requirements is so open to nuance, personal variations, ambiguity that it's dangerous to make any important decisions on the basis of a document, which may be influenced as much by the author's individual style as by the actual properties of the projected software system. Everybody has different backgrounds, and everybody might interpret the exact same thing in 20 different ways. So that's the downside about doing this, because it is very English based, very prone to human interpretation. So even though it's not perfect, but coupled with other techniques, it's a good start. Some recommendations: you should have a fully developed SRS, or what we've studied is any SRS, even if it's in progress. It's for best results, it sounds like we should have a fully developed SRS. So you use this technique to obviously identify any methods or class and objects and that sort of stuff. Terms that are domain specific in use cases. Recurring nouns, so where it will be able to group classes, and once we group them, let's say in a spreadsheet, you can identify these recurring nouns, and then you can associate, if they're related, certain functions with those nouns. And real-world entities and activities are able to track by the system. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope it was informative to you.